There's a plot hole in Harry Potter so huge, it should have broken the entire series. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Fred and George Weasley introduce us to a magical map that tracks every single person inside Hogwarts, and for years, they never noticed that their little brother Ron is sharing a dorm room with a villain named Peter Pettigrew. It just sounds completely unbelievable. And before you rush over to the comments and say, well, they just weren't looking at Ron, let's stop that right there, because that's the easy excuse, but it falls apart the second you look at what the Marauders map is actually capable of. Because let's not forget that in the same book, Lupin glances at the map and immediately sees Pettigrew creeping around the Hogwarts grounds, which completely unravels the mystery. The map is used when we need it the least, but it's ignored when needed most. And this isn't just a one-off either. Later on, Snape uses the map to find Lupin in a matter of seconds, and he just looks down at his desk and bam, he knew exactly where he was. A quick glance was all it takes. So, to be clear, Fred and George had a live GPS of the castle, and yet they somehow missed a villain, who was disguising as a huge fat rat all that time by the way, appearing on the map next to Ron every single day and night, for years. Alright, court is in session. Now, my rules for plot holes is pretty simple. I'm not asking characters to be flawless robots. I mean, people miss stuff all the time. Teens are dumb and adults are somehow worse. That's fine. A plot hole is when the story gives you a rule, proves that the rule works, and then has to dodge the consequences because the consequences would blow the whole mystery apart. Now, in case you're not living in the fandom trenches like the rest of us, the Marauders map is a magical map of Hogwarts. You activate it with a phrase, and it shows you the castle layout, the secret passages, and the names of people moving around inside it. Fred and George are Ron's older twin brothers, and they're professional rule breakers. They get the map before Harry does, and they use it for sneaking around, and then they hand it down to him. Peter Pettigrew is one of James Potter's old friends. Everyone thinks that he died years ago, but in reality, in Prisoner of Azkaban, we find out that he's been alive the whole time, hiding as Ron's pet rat Scabbers. And he's able to do that because he's an animagus. That's a wizard who can turn into an animal at will. So Pettigrew can just be a rat, and he can avoid jail, Sirius, the consequences, and deodorant apparently. So the question is, if the map shows people by their names, how did Fred and George never spot Peter Pettigrew basically glued to Ron for years? Well, now we put Exhibit A on the stand, the map's canon abilities in black and white. In Prisoner of Azkaban, when Fred and George hand Harry the map, they don't sell it like, oh, here's a cute drawing of Hogwarts. They hype it up as showing basically everything, including where everyone is. What Fred and George are holding is a live tracking system dressed up as a school map. That's a pretty wild object to exist inside a mystery story. And it's explicitly used for stealth. The entire point is that you can sneak around at night and not get caught by the teachers or by Filch, which means you are, by definition, checking where the people are. And now here's where the map becomes hard evidence, because in the climax, Lupin says that he was watching it and he saw Harry and the others moving, and he saw the man himself, Peter Pettigrew. That's the book telling you that the map will show Pettigrew by name, on the record in the text. Then later, Snape stumbles across the map lying open on Lupin's desk. He didn't crack it open, Lupin left it out, but one glance at an already active map and he immediately sees Lupin's route. Even accidentally, it gives him everything that he needs in seconds. So if Lupin and Snape can both use this thing in real time during a problem, the story itself is confirming that the map is accurate, readable, and reliable. And that means that the Pettigrew crisis isn't just a meme, but rather a ticking clock. And if that clock is real, then yeah, we need to talk about why it never went off in the Gryffindor dorm. Let's walk the logic chain, slowly, like we're explaining it to a judge who hates whimsy. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Fred and George admit that they've had the Marauders map and they've been using it to sneak around Hogwarts. That's canon. But the twist is that Ron's rat Scabbers is Peter Pettigrew. meaning that for years at Hogwarts, Ron's constant little pet is really a grown wizard villain in disguise. So if the map shows people by name and Ron has scabbers with him constantly, then the map should repeatedly show Ron with Peter Pettigrew basically attached to him. And I'm not saying that Fred and George should have opened a case file and started drawing red string lines across their dorm room wall, but what I am saying is that at some point, the two boys who live for chaos should notice the weirdest recurring name in the Gryffindor boys' dorm. And this is also why the movies make people even madder about it, because the movie map shots look like the names are big and readable, sliding around like a screensaver. But even if we do stay strictly in the books, the logic is still just crazy to me. I mean, they should have solved the mystery way before. But now, let's get to the defense, because we should keep this fair. But I'm warning you though, some of these excuses only really sound good until you hold them next to what Prisoner of Azkaban actually shows. Defense number one is the classic. Fred and George weren't using the map to spy on Ron, they were using it to sneak around. And to be fair, that is reasonable. The teen boys aren't normally sitting there like, ooh, let's check the dorm and see if our little brother is safe and emotionally thriving. The entire point of the Marauder's map is to see who's coming so you can get out of the way. You don't avoid Filch by admiring the floor plan, you avoid him by tracking his little dot in real time. And we see Harry do this constantly in Goblet of Fire. He's pulling out the map just to make sure that Filch and Mrs. Norris are safely tucked away in their office before he sneaks around. This establishes the map as an active surveillance tool, constantly monitoring everyone in the castle. It's not just a blueprint, it's a live feed. And that constant surveillance isn't neutral. The map tracks everyone, which of course includes Severus Snape. And as it turns out, the map has very strong feelings about him. Do you remember in Prisoner of Azkaban when Snape confiscates the map and tries to force it to reveal its secret? He pulls out his wand demanding answers, and the map just starts roasting him. It tells Snape to keep his abnormally large nose out of other people's business, and even advises him to go wash his greasy hair. This literal piece of enchanted parchment took one look at a professor and it chose violence. This shows that the map isn't some impartial magical object, it has the grudges of its creators baked right into the ink. So for years, Fred and George are using this highly opinionated, Snape-hating GPS to sneak around, and in all that time, they never happened to glance over at Gryffindor Tower and wonder why a grown man named Peter Pettigrew was sleeping in their little brother's bed every night. So the excuse of they weren't watching Ron still doesn't explain how, over years of using a people tracker, they never once accidentally clocked the villain's name that was living in Ron's pocket. But even if you buy that excuse, we still have the next problem. Could they even read the thing well enough for any of this to matter? Now, this one is popular because it sounds like it's the kind of practical limitation that would actually save this plot hole. Hogwarts is packed to the brim full of kids, so maybe the map is just an ant farm of names. Maybe Peter Pettigrew is written so small underneath 40 other names, and Fred and George are like, corridor looks clear, let's go. Here's the issue though. J.K. Rowling never gave us a rule that the map could be unusable. That limitation simply just isn't there, so the map shouldn't be hard to use and it should just solve all of this. What the book actually shows is the exact opposite. Lupin can look at it and specifically identify Pettigrew, not some extra person and not a suspicious dot. He identifies Pettigrew. And Snape, who couldn't even get the map to show him anything when he tried, stumbles across it lying open on a desk and reads Lupin's entire route in one accidental glance. So saying it's too crowded feels like an excuse that we invent because we want a clear answer. The canon says that it's readable enough for real-time tracking when it matters. As we know, a plot hole is when the story breaks its own rules. The map shows everyone by name, and that's the rule, right? Peter Pettigrew lives undetected for 2.5 years, and that's the break. And unlike most plot holes, this one didn't stay contained. It forced every mystery Rowling wrote afterward to be built around one question that she could never answer. Why doesn't Harry just check the map? But there is one final defense. But I'm going to suck the soul out of it like a Dementor just to show you how bad this plot hole is. If it's readable, maybe Pettigrew doesn't show up at all. Because he's an animal, or animagi, or whatever you want to call it. Now, this is the cleanest possible fix. If Pettigrew is a rat, maybe the map just treats him as a rat. Maybe the map only labels humans, so Scabbers would either not show up or just show up as rat or whatever. Fred and George are off the hook. It's a neat idea. It would actually solve a lot. And then Lupin ruins it. Because Lupin explicitly says he saw Peter Pettigrew on the map, which means Pettigrew can appear by his human name while still living as Scabbers. Now, some people try to salvage it with a more specific solution, like maybe only the Marauders can see other Marauders' true names, like the map has some loyalty-based recognition thing built in. And honestly, as a headcanon, it's kinda sick. But it's also completely absent from the Prisoner of Azkaban book and the movie. The twins never mention it, and Lupin never says it, and the map itself never even hints that it works that way. So canon confirms that Pettigrew can be identified on the map. The twist is exposed the moment anyone with the map looks at the right room, which means the last refuge is, even if they saw it, they wouldn't know who that is. Okay, now we're getting serious, because maybe they didn't even know who Peter Pettigrew was, so why would they even care? And this one's also a fair one on the surface. Fred and George are teenagers, and Peter Pettigrew is not exactly a name that they'd be revising for their herbology finals. They're not sitting around reading up on the Ministry files. No, they're building a future around selling candy that makes you throw up on purpose. So yeah, maybe they see Peter Pettigrew and just assume that it's some random student. But here's where the defense quietly falls apart though, because the issue was never whether they recognized him as the guy Sirius supposedly murdered. The map is a list of named people in specific places, so a ground-sounding full government name showing up in the Gryffindor boys' dorm near Ron repeatedly, yeah, that's strange even without any biography attached. Like, who is this person and why do they keep appearing in my brother's bed? At bare minimum, that's a prank opportunity, and Fred and George do not strike me as the type to just ignore a prank opportunity. Also, the book is literally written so that the Scabbers reveal hits because he's been here the whole time. The shock is built on absolute craziness that this guy was here all this time. Ron has been living with this rat, trusting this rat, and even sleeping in the same room as this rat. And it's a man? Not recognizing the name explains why they don't report it, but it doesn't explain why Harry never used it properly. And this is where it stops being two idiots missed a dot, and it starts being this object breaks the plot. The Marauders map arrives like a fun contraband prank item, like, ooh, sneaking, secret passages, mischief? Alright, I'm down. But what it actually functions as is a surveillance weapon. It shows the castle's layout, hidden passages, everyone's location, everyone's name live. And Prisoner of Azkaban as a story runs on information scarcity for the storytelling, of course. I mean, I get that. Sirius Black is so terrifying partly because nobody knows how he's getting in. Nobody knows where he is, and the castle is supposed to feel unsafe, but also unknowable. The tension is he here, and how did he do that? And then the book hands you a device that answers where is he in real time. Lupin uses it during the climax, and Snape uses it right after. Both of them treat it as credible enough to act on immediately. So, the uncomfortable question then becomes, why doesn't this object detonate the entire mystery earlier? I mean, it's so dumb. Well, I'll tell you why. Because once the map exists and is used consistently, it covers literally everything. Who's in the corridor, who's sneaking out, and who's in a passage that they shouldn't be in. Why is that name in Gryffindor Tower? Why is Sirius Black not showing up anywhere? Or is he? How is anyone ever surprised by anything ever after this? I mean, I almost get so angry only thinking about it. And that's why the Pettigrew question sticks. Because asking it doesn't just mean Fred and George were inattentive once. A truth machine inside a mystery story should trip over the truth long before the author wants it to. And once you see that the map is being managed, available when the plot needs it, and quietly ignored when it would blow everything open, the whole castle just starts feeling a little less solid, and honestly, the story feels a bit dumber too. So here is my verdict. The cleanest reading of Prisoner of Azkaban is that the Marauders map works perfectly when the plot needs a reveal and becomes conveniently underused when it would spoil the twist. Fred and George can use it for years and never even stumble onto the secret. Lupin looks at it at the exact right moment and goes, oh, there he is. And then Snape, who earlier in the same book got personally roasted by the map when he tried to force it open, finds it lying open on a desk and reads Lupin's route in one single glance. When Snape tries to demand answers from it, the map hits him with a roast so savage it feels like my ex-girlfriend is talking to me. But when it's just sitting there, already running, it told him everything, instantly. So you see, fans don't obsess over this because they hate Fred and George. They obsess over it because once you see it, you can't unsee what it implies about the world. I mean, Hogwarts is already a lawsuit waiting to happen, and now it's also got a portable live tracking system that students can use to outsmart the staff, and the story still wants you to feel like huge secrets can hide in plain sight for years. Now, to be fair, I still like the map as a storytelling device. I mean, it's fun, and it gives Prisoner of Azkaban that whole sneaking around energy, and so I get why it exists, don't get me wrong. But it comes with a cost, and it's that the map is so strong that the story has to manage it with selective blindness, and that's what makes it so stupid. So that's why this one ruins things for people. A single cracked rule doesn't break one scene, but of course it makes the whole structure just feel negotiable. And once you know the map can define anyone, you start noticing every moment it conveniently doesn't. Ron's rat wasn't just a rat, and likewise, the map wasn't just a map. If the Marauders map is canonically that reliable in Prisoner of Azkaban, then Pettigrew should have been a problem years earlier. So that's the whole case. And the case is closed. This plot hole ruins Harry Potter. But here's what I want to leave you with. The map is a story about something being hidden in plain sight for years, and everyone around it being just convenient enough to not look directly at it. Sound familiar? Because believe it or not, that's also the story of Ron Weasley. Not the Ron from the films though. Not the scared, bumbling sidekick who was lucky to be in the frame. I mean the real one. The one J.K. Rowling actually wrote. Because the films did to Ron exactly what the story did to the map. They kept him in the background, and they handed his best moments to someone else. They managed him carefully, consistently across all 8 films until most people just accepted that the smaller version was what we have and assumed that that's all there was. But it wasn't. If you want to know who Ron Weasley actually is, and why losing him is one of the most damaging things the adaptations ever did to this story, check out our previous video. And I promise you, by the end of it, you won't be able to watch the trio the same way again.